which ones we have a choice in, and if so, what choices can we make, and so forth. Now, let's look at number 23 there. I don't know if you can, I think you can see these. I keep forgetting to blow them up more. I don't know why I don't, but 23 is the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week. Is that mandatory, prohibited, a choice that we can make one way or the other? What is it? Choice. So it's a choice. We can have it or not have it. I think it's required to have it on the first day of the week. I say required in the sense that's the example that we have. On the first day of the week, the disciples came together to break bread. And we have no other mention of anything else that they did, so that kind of limits it to that. That's why they gave. In fact, I don't have the verse here. I don't have it to pull up right for you here, but if you go to Acts 20 and verse 7, the idea there is it says the disciples were gathered together. Now, the grammar there, both in English and Greek, is in that sense a passive thing. It doesn't say they gathered together on the first day of the week, not in the Greek. It doesn't say they gathered. They were gathered. So, it's the difference between... Well, what is the difference between they gathered on the first day of the week and they were gathered on the first day? What does that mean, difference?
Were gathered implies that was a routine thing.
Were gathered implies a routine?
To me.
Maybe. Yes, it's possible. That's right. So I think it's more, I think it's...
They expected to be there.
It's what?
They expected to be there.
They expected to be there, or they were expected to be there.
Yeah.
There's a difference there too. Not that they expected. Were gathered means somebody else gathered them or something else gathered them. If they gathered, who did it? Well, they did it. If they gathered, they did it. If they were gathered, something else did it, brought them together. No? Yes? Well, what was it that brought them together on the first day of the week? The command to assemble. The Lord did. What? Well, that's why they did it, to break bread. They could have broken bread any day, but why were they gathered on that day? Something else gathered them. It was a command. It was understood that was the command. What'd you say, Sandy?
I said it was a command, and they knew that.
Well, that's what it means. They were gathered. They were gathered by something outside of themselves to assemble on the first day of the week. They didn't just make it up on their own or do it optionally in some way. They were gathered for that, and that's the force of the language there. And the purpose was to break bread. Okay? That's the purpose, among other things. We also know that Paul preached to them on that day. So the Lord's Supper is not the only thing that we gather for. Some people try to imply that. It doesn't even say it's the most important thing that we gather for. Okay? But I know we tend to think that. But it doesn't say that I know of anywhere. But it's very clear that the Lord said, "This do in remembrance of me." They obviously were gathered to do it out on the first day of the week. So the question is, if you want to do something different, my point would be, by what authority or by what information do you do something different than that? Why would you? Well, people have their reasons. We like it better this way. We want to do it on Thursday. So they have their reasons, but the question is, from the standpoint from the Bible, why would you do it either on some other day or not do it at all? You know, Baptists will do it once a quarter, for some will do it. Some will do it every 6 months. Some will do it once a year, not just Baptists, other, and so forth. Now my question, they say, well, we want to make it special. Oh, that sounds so great. That sounds so religious. We don't want people just to do the Lord's Supper every week and then they get bored with it. We want to make it special. I have a better suggestion. Let's do it once every 100 years. Or maybe you should just do it once in your lifetime. Well, if you can decide to do it every 6 months, you can decide to do it once in your lifetime. Can't you?
You can.
If you get away from what the scriptures say on the first day of the week, and you say, well, let's make it special.
It
Well, who gets to decide what special is? You do. So why can't you make it every 100 years? That'd be really special, wouldn't it? You all look like I'm making a stupid point. I don't really think I'm making a stupid point. This is called in legal logic terms, reductio ad absurdum. It means reducing something to the absurd. And that's a favorite method of mine to show how things are. So if you don't have a reason not to reduce it to the absurd, then your position is probably incorrect.
Who gave the command?
Who gave the command? Well, the Lord. Right. Apparently, through the apostles, he gave the command to do it on the first day of the week. And I'll tell you how he gave the command to us is he wrote that example down right there, and that's what they did. That's how he gave the command to me and you. And we don't have any other information as when to do it, and so we ought to do it then. If it says first day of the week, how often should we do it? Well, logically speaking, it has to be every first day of the week. Because otherwise, by what authority do you skip some first days of the week to have it another first day of the week? You can't do it. Yes.
Making it special is when he told us to remember Christ's death, burial, and resurrection.
I know, but they say, well, you can make it really special by not doing it all the time. Now, that's the logic of most denominational churches today. I'm not kidding you. I'm not making that up. You can read. That's what they say. So, and it sounds very religious. It's so special. We're going to do it every 6 months. Well, it's not special. It's not religious. Religious is, what do we find in the Bible? How close can we get to that? Let's do it that way, as close as we can, and not argue about it.
Religious is doing it on the first day of the week.
Yeah, right. So, I know, I guess I'm sounding a little bit rough here. I'll back up. I'll dial it back a couple of notches. But seriously, when they try to, I guess I had some discussion with somebody yesterday about me being a skeptical and suspicious person. One of my nieces has noticed this. And I think a lot of people in my family notice this. I'm like, yeah, so what's wrong with that? I'm suspicious of you if you're not suspicious of what's going on around you. If you can look at what's happening around you today and not be suspicious or not be skeptical of what you're hearing, then I'm skeptical about you. You need to get awake, shake yourself awake.
Yeah, you better hold
Huh?
tight to your kids.
So,
You better hang on tight to your children.
Yeah.
There's some real.
But that makes, when you do that, you're really suspicious, hanging on tight to your children. So you're really, but I'm just saying, people, we need to be a little more, when we hear an idea, that's fine, listen to it, and then think about it. Don't just accept it. People see stuff on the news, and they just absorb it in, and they're being told even a part of a truth, not even half a truth. I wish they were telling half truth. That'd be better. They're not even telling half the truth.
Mike,
And people just absorb it, and they need to be more skeptical about it. And same thing is true from up here, okay? You need to be skeptical of what I'm saying and think about it. Yes, ma'am.
you gotta be skeptical when you lose 300 and some children.
To lose them?
Yes, they lost them. They don't know where they are. Well, take a good guess.
Look.
It's awful.
Oh, Sandy.
I know.
You're going to get me.
No, I'm not.
So,
It's the truth.
you can go on the internet, and I can tell you two things quickly. Whether a website is done by a business or whether it's done by a government agency. And I can tell you in 2 minutes by trying to use it. Okay, whether it's done by a government agency, a school system, or something like that, or whether it's done by a business. So when they lose children, should it surprise you that they lose children? Don't know where they are? Of course not. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. That includes the police too, Bob. Anyway, go ahead. All right, I'm just kidding you.
If I'm not here today, can you bring communion over to Okeechobee and give it to me or Joyce if we are not here in the assembly?
Well, the question is not can I, but will I? First of all, we'll start with that. No, but I think it's on here. All right. He says if he were not here, should we take him the communion? He lives in Okeechobee, but that makes it more complicated. But if it's true, it's true. Should we take people that aren't here, take them the communion? And they sell little kits come in a leather pouch that you take the communion to people who are not there. Should you do that?
I don't think you see.
Now that's another subject. We haven't quite got to the Lord's Supper yet. But the basis of the question is not how far Bob lives. It's not whether I like the person. Fundamentally, you have to decide, is the Lord's Supper an individual act or is it a group act? You have to decide that issue. Is it an individual act that you do to make you holy, or is it a group act that we do together as a remembrance? You have to decide what the Scriptures say. Once you make that decision, some of the other choices become simpler. But it's a hard decision because people get their feelings hurt about it. And they've been conditioned by the Roman Catholic idea that taking the communion makes you holy and forgives your sins. And it makes you holy every week to take it. They've been conditioned by that idea that's how they view the Lord's Supper. And the Lord's Supper, in my opinion, is not that. That's not what it is. But it's hard to get away from that because that's how we all been conditioned to think about it. We're supposed to sit here in silence and meditate about how sinful we are, and the Lord's Supper here is then we associate that with forgiveness of sins. The Lord's Supper is not associated with the forgiveness of sins. All right, first Doug, and I think Karen has something, and then Inell.
Okay, if a person is totally unable to be here, I think that they can still remember Christ's death, burial, and resurrection on the first day of the week.
Well, I didn't say they couldn't remember it if they're not able to be here. The question is, should we take it, as a church, take it to them? You can remember it at home. Now, see, I'll do my cynical thing here now, okay? I'll do my cynical thing. I've had this position since I've been a young man. The pandemic, the global, worldwide, unprecedented pandemic, should have proven to most of us once and for all that people think the Lord's Supper can be taken individually and should be taken individually. Why would I say that? They objected to this before. But when you have the idea put forward by preachers and everybody else that we can all take the Lord's Supper at home because of quarantine, what makes it different when the quarantine is lifted? If you believe that that's a proper way to take the Lord's Supper by yourself at home, and you can believe that. I'm just saying, if you believe that, why should I then, once the quarantine's over, take you the Lord's Supper? Anybody have an answer?
Matthew 18, verse 20.
What's that?
Matthew 18, verse 20.
Which says what?
Where two or three people are gathered together in my name.
Yes. Well, of course, the context of that is not the Lord's Supper, but that would mean that you can't do it by yourself at any time. If it means anything, it means you have to have two or three. You see what I'm saying? Are you?
I see what you're saying, so which comes back to his question.
Now look.
If two or three persons were to take it to him, then he'd be able to fellowship.
Okay, I'm going to have you repeat that because I could not hear you.
Yes.
Say it to me
So
again.
it comes back to his question. If he's
Yes.
sick and unable to come to us, if two brethren, visits him, then he's able to worship and partake.
Well, here's the point that I'm making, and I made that thing clear because I think our assumptions are so deeply founded for so many years that we're not able to think a little bit, break away from that. If you are at home in a quarantine, or you are in some place where there's just you or a couple other people, and you're out there in the middle of nowhere on the Lord's Day, I don't have any problem with the two of you or even one of you taking the elements of the Lord's Supper and having the Lord's Supper. I don't have a problem with that. I've done that. That's not the same as saying that I have to take it by myself and you need to bring it to me because the church official, a preacher, has to take it over to you before you can take the supper. It has to be done under the official authority of a local church. If the verse you're quoting applies in this case, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, then I think those 2 or 3 can take the supper. Now the question is, if they keep doing that week after week, are they trying to be a church? Are they really a church? Or what's going on there? But now for somebody to do something once in a while, because it's kind of a exigent circumstance, to use that
Let's say
phrase.
you have someone who's bedridden.
It's what?
Bedridden.
Let's say you have someone.
If someone's bedridden, then here's my opinion. The Lord says, gather together and drink ye all of it. All of you drink it. That's what the word says. You all drink it. Take this and do, it's a group act. It's everybody doing it together. It's the body of Christ doing it together. That's what's presented. In 1 Corinthians 11, that's what's presented. The body doing it together. Now then, if you're not there because you're sick, do you have an obligation to do it? I don't think you do. I think the obligation is gone. You can't be there. Now, you say, well, I should be there. Yeah, you should be there if you can, but if you can't, you can't. Because the group is taking
The
it.
question is, do you have a right?
Hold it. What's this?
Is that going to take away from you being able to truly worship if you're unable to come out and fellowship?
Look, what I'm saying is if you're sick in bed or sick at home, I'm not saying you can't worship. You can worship God wherever you are. You can take the supper there if you want to. But that doesn't mean the church is that. I don't think that person who is truly bedridden at home has an obligation to be at the assembly and take the supper with all the saints. There's no obligation there because they can't be there. Since it's a group act, it's a thing that should be done together because we're a body. We're one bread. We're one body. And that's the problem with the Catholic idea is that we're all individually have to take it individually because it forgives our sins or makes us holy or something like that. And I reject that reasoning personally. All right, we have 2 or 3 people that want to comment. First, Doug. I think Karen had something, and then Chad.
They still have the right to remember, even if they're bedridden, they still have the right to remember Christ's death.
I don't say they don't. I'm saying they have a right to do that. They can do it at home individually if they desire. I don't think they have an obligation to do that because they can't be with the rest of the saints to do that. But not everybody. Look, we used to offer the Lord's Supper on Sunday night service here, and I've been other places like that. If I was sick on Sunday morning, really sick and couldn't be here, I'm usually sick on Sunday night too. If I'm sick enough to not be there Sunday morning, I'm going to be sick enough to not be there Sunday night. But occasionally, something happened, you can be there Sunday night. I didn't take the supper. Because I have no obligation to take the supper. It's not an individual act. The rest of the church took it. I missed it. That's just the way it was. It didn't bother me. I'm not saying I'd have been wrong if I did. I'm saying that now other people's conscience won't let them do that. We're not arguing about whether your conscience will let you. If you have a conscience problem, then you should take the supper. But if you think you can take it one at a time sitting in church when nobody else is taking it, what's the difference between that and taking it home by yourself? There's nothing. In my view, there's no difference. Maybe there is. Huh? But that's what's presented. And during the pandemic, everybody. Now that was a theoretical question. So we're here taking the supper. The camera there picks up images, and people at home take it at the same time. Are they doing it with us or not? Now that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question.
You have to define group. What is a group?
What's that?
You have to define what is a group.
What's the group? Now, at the very least at home, if they're doing that, they're doing the Lord's Supper on their own. And I don't know that the scriptures say that you need to take it on your own on Sunday. I don't know where I'd have to think about that. I thought about it, and I can't really see the interpretation of the scriptures that talk about the Lord's Supper, that I should be taking this individually on my own. I'm not sure where they are. But people have come to feel like I need to take it every Sunday on my own wherever I am. And I think they associate that with forgiveness or with being right with God. So if that's their conscience, they should do that. But it's a group act, I think. All right, stop right there for a minute because we've got two or three other comments. We're probably going to get... Did you want to say something, Karen? Okay, Chad, real loud for me.
Yeah, you kind of answered my question, but the way I view this is if you are sick, there's no reason for you to just, for someone to bring you the Lord's Supper when you're going to be missing all the other acts of worship. That means your worship is pretty much vain because you're not doing all acts of worship, just one act. That doesn't mean...
But the Lord's Supper is viewed as the act that's the most important because it, my view again, because it imparts some kind of grace.
And the way how I view it as well, if you are sick, the Lord knows that. He's not expecting you to be there to participate in something when you are bedridden or you're locked in. You're not obligated in that way, but if you can't make it, you have to make it.
I'm smiling because when I was a young man, I remember the church where I was, people had this discussion. They would say, well, if you're providentially hindered from being here this morning, we offer the Lord's Supper to you. Providentially hindered became, now, a lot of people in my family are skeptical, not just me. So they would say, so what does that mean? That you're saying God prevented you from having the Lord's Supper this morning? And now you get to take it tonight because God didn't prevent you tonight, but prevented you this morning? What are we saying here? What they were trying to say is, if you were really sick this morning or couldn't be here. Now look, suppose I'm on my way to... The other day when I left services, we were like the first people on a pretty bad accident down here on PSL Boulevard. I ran up to the car. I jumped out of the car, ran up there to see if the two young men were all right and make sure that the police were called and stayed there with them until the ambulance got there and all that. Okay, I'm such a good person. It's really incredible. But the point I'm saying is, suppose that had happened if I'm on my way to services and I had to spend an hour there with those two young men to make sure they're all right, and I miss it. Is that providentially hindered? Probably. And should I stay after and take the supper? Well, my point is some people would say, yeah, I feel conscious bound to take the supper afterwards. And all that. I'm saying for what we teach, though, I think we should teach it as a group act. If you still feel that you should take it on your own, then I think you should. Does that obligate the whole group to bring it to you? Probably not, in my opinion. Could be. And you know, I've taken, see, here's the thing you're forgetting. I've taken the Lord's Supper to people who've asked me to bring it to them, who are in the hospital for a long time or at home. I've taken it to them, even though personally I wouldn't do that. I've taken it to them because it means something to them. What do you think about that? I'm a total fraud, aren't I? No, but that's their conscience. It may, in my opinion, be not well informed in some ways, but that's what they think, and I've kind of sympathetically take it. Look, I admire people, especially old, I see most of this happens with older people who really want to be there and want to be in worship, and it hurts them when they can't. That's not to be thrown aside. That's an admirable trait. The question is, what's right then to teach as doctrine as opposed to what you do out of compassion? You see the difference? Because I don't think you should let what you do as an exceptional case of compassion become the standard that you put up as what the Bible teaches. You teach what the Bible says, and then you sometimes have to have compassion. Like the Bible said, don't work on the Sabbath day. Did Jesus say it was okay to get your ox out of the ditch? Yes. Okay? Because that was a circumstance, emergency that arose, and you can get your ox out of the ditch. That's work. But that didn't violate the Sabbath, because they weren't ignoring it. They simply had something happen that they couldn't help. Providentially hindered from keeping the Sabbath because they had an ox go in the ditch. So you don't make laws based on the exception. You don't make principles based on some imaginary exception that you find. You look at what the scriptures say, and then that becomes what you teach. And then are there going to be cases where you have to say, well, that makes sense over here? Yes, there are. All right. I imposed my view on you, and I feel bad about that. So let's back up. Who wants to say something else about this? First Doug, then Bob. I saw that.
The point of us taking the Lord's Supper is to remember his death, burial, and resurrection. And that there's something that impedes us from being the assembly, some emergency that we can't. We can still remember that on the first day of the week his death, burial, and resurrection.
Yeah, I don't substantially disagree with that, but, and I'll argue against myself. I made the statement that all the texts seem to present the supper in the context of the group taking it together as a body. We are one bread, one body, and it's one. The blood represents one covenant that we all live under as one group. Now, the argument against that is: are you trying to say that just because he was talking to a group of Christians, that's the only way you can apply it? So, I'll admit there's some merit to that he might have meant to the Corinthians, you can all do it individually. Well, do you think if you read the text of 1 Corinthians, you're getting the idea that they could have all taken the supper at home by themselves? Do you think that's what that text is authorizing? Everybody take it at home by yourselves?
They came together.
On whatever day you want? No, they came together to break bread. So that implies a group coming together to break bread. Now, whether there are exceptions to that over here for some other reason, okay, we could muddle that over and people might differ about it, but let's don't ignore the fundamental doctrine that's there, that it's a group act that we're gathered together for, that we partake of when we come together. So, if Bob misses out there in Okeechobee because he went fishing in the morning, and I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding. Is it okay to go fishing? As long as you're here as you're here for the Lord's Supper, don't expect me to bring it to you. No, no, I'm just teasing Bob. If Bob can't be here next Sunday, and somebody wants to take him the Lord's Supper afterwards, there's no problem with that per se, as long as it doesn't begin to, over time. See, exceptions to teaching eventually bring about new teaching. They bring about a new doctrine. They change the doctrine over time, if you're not careful, if you don't keep it in there. So you make an exception, which might be justified here or there for this, and pretty soon that exception, since it's nice, becomes the rule. And I think over time in a church and in history, that's bad. Because our job is to maintain what the text says from one generation to another. And we can all have our things on either side, but don't forget the big picture. So I have no problem taking the Lord's Supper to Bob if he wants me to. Do I think it requires a little special kit that I carry around because we have so many and everybody does it so often? Well, it depends on the church. If you've got 10 widows at home who can't get out, maybe somebody wants to do that. Now, I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed to that becoming the norm, that's what the Lord's Supper is about, just you taking it by yourself. And I'm afraid the pandemic kind of did that to everybody. I'm afraid it kind of altered everybody's thinking that it's okay just to take it wherever you are, whenever you want to, with whoever you want to. I don't think that's correct. That's my... All right. Who else had another comment? Yes, ma'am.
Well, even though we take it as a group, it's still an individual thing.
Well, no group can do anything unless individuals do it. Name something that a group can do that individuals don't do. Every group act requires individuals to do it. So yes, you have to do it. But I'm saying you're doing it when you're gathered together. Now what they use is, well, let each man examine himself, so therefore it's a completely individual act. I don't think that's what that means at all. Because otherwise, why would he gather us together to do something that we're all in little, what's the word today, silos? Everybody silos their thinking. So we're all in these little individual, like on Star Trek, everybody has a little tube that comes down. The cone of silence comes down over. I'm trying to use something, maybe this audience, I'm reaching for metaphors this audience might understand. The cone of silence. Remember Maxwell Smart, the cone of silence? That's really reaching for some of you. Anyway, the cone of silence comes down over all these little individuals in the church, and they all offer their worship up to God. That's not what the Lord's Supper looks like. That's not what singing looks like. Our singing is all together, blended together. But if individuals don't sing, is there any singing? Is singing an individual act or a group act?
Yes.
It's both in a certain way. Individuals have to do it, but it's meant to be offered up from the assembly. That's why he says that, that's why it's put the way it is there in Ephesians 5:19 about singing and making melody in your hearts to the Lord. Those are all plural words, group words there in that verse. But it's done by individuals. And look, if you want to understand it and say, I think the Lord's Supper is an individual act, okay, then I think you have to accept the consequences of that or the conclusions that come with that. I'm going to force that on you. You have to accept the rightful. And there's always consequences to every belief. Every belief has something that you have to accept. You can't just take a new position and have no consequences. So there's consequences saying it's a group act. There's consequences saying it's an individual act. And you have to live with those.
It's an individual act.
It's an individual act done in a group. We can work it all together.
No, we take it individually. That's it. We take it individually. If it's brought to us.
So you don't need to be in a group when you do it.
Yes, you should be in.
Well,
if it's possible, you should be in the church.
If it's possible.
If it's possible. If it is not, and it's a hindrance, God knows that, and the people can bring it to you. I don't see anything wrong with that.
I didn't say it was wrong to do it. I'm saying I'm not ready to teach it's an individual act because I don't read that in the scripture.
It's really not. an
I think it's a group act done when we gather together, when you are come together,
in a certain way.
and that's when it's to be done.
Yeah.
Can you do it other times? Yes, you can. The Sabbath was to be kept on a certain day. And God provided for some people, because of an exception there, they're going to take it 1 month later, a few of them. Did everybody get to take it 1 month later? That became the rule? Well, they tried probably. But I don't think that was right. When was the Sabbath supposed to be taken? The Scriptures told them when to take it, and they should have kept it that day. If there was something that they couldn't help, had taken another day, then God would figure that out. But you don't go taking that fact that he made that over here and change what's here. At least the way I think. Now, I saw another hand. Yes, sir.
I was told one time that I could not take the Lord's Supper. Now, I used to work a bunch of midnight shifts, and dealing with the elite people in Blytheville, Arkansas on Saturday night.
Elite people in Arkansas? That's an oxymoron. We'll come back to that. Go ahead.
And they were, too.
Huh?
And they were going on. But anyway, I was really not in a frame of mind. But, when you get off at 7 o'clock, service starts at 10. You don't kind of feel like staying up. We had a carnival night and everything. And I went to church that night and they asked to take communion. And after one of the members said, you can't do that. And I said, well, I'm with the assembly.
Bob said, watch me.
I'm with the assembly. I was still not in the frame of mind. I said, I'm in the assembly. I said, I know it's dark outside. Is this still the first day of the week? And they said yes, and I said, now tell me I can't. I didn't say it.
See, as heartless as you may think I sound, I would not refuse the Lord's Supper to anyone who really wanted to take it. Because in the end, they have to live by their conscience, and I'm not going to hinder their conscience over something. They're not asking if I can kill somebody. They're asking if I can do something that the Lord did command. Maybe I don't agree about the circumstance, but I'm not going to hinder them from honoring God. That would not be my right. That's why I've served it to people that I wouldn't have taken it myself at that time, but I serve it to them because it is their conscience. And they should not refuse. I've seen churches have closed communion, and a person who's not a Christian tries to take it, they jerk it out of their hand. You know, when they're passing around, they jerk it away from people that they don't think are Christians. That's called closed communion. I don't agree with that either.
Mike, what do you consider a group? Right?
A group?
This is my question.
What do you consider a group?
Everybody within this room, or the people in the lobby a group, if you're at the church building, sitting on the park, on the bench outside, now you're going to say...
That's a good question, Brian. And that's the question the sister in the back was asking about the 2 or 3 gathered together in my name.
Right.
I believe that's what she was getting at now, I think. That's a good question. What is the group? I just... In this building, the people in the lobby come with the group. They can hear. They're with us in that. Now, maybe you could, and I can see you could say, well, the people online, they're hearing and seeing the same thing. Maybe they're part of the group. And I think that's not illogical, is it? That sounds reasonable up to a point.
Right.
Okay? But the idea with sometimes with live streaming is I don't have to try to be with them, and I don't know. That's a good question. What is a group? What does it mean? Well, the way I would define that scripturally is, what does it mean to come together? That's how I would look at that. What does it mean to come together? Are the people in the lobby, have they come together? Yes, they have. And so are the people here online. They've come together. What do you think about that answer?
I mean, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to be.
And so therefore, but don't make the fact that we do something digitally a week later or different days. I don't know. All right, we got to stop. Our time is gone. Thank you so much. One more thing, and guess who's going to get blamed for going over? But go ahead, Doug.
Okay, if I bring some with me, I never know what to do, whether I should offer them. I know they're not a Christian. I don't know whether I should offer them or not.
If you want to, I don't think, I don't know. Let them pass it to them. Let them decide.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I would do. Now, some people say, oh, no, you shouldn't let them know that it's okay to take it. I don't think you do any good by jerking it out of their hand and making sure they can take it. But does it do them any good to take it? I can't say. Christians are supposed to remember the Lord. Now, the question is, could that person who's not a Christian remember the Lord's death? Maybe. Even if they're not a true believer, they might remember. But sometimes people do things like that, Doug, just because they don't want to stand out and pass it on. They don't want to be thought of, I don't like Jesus. Here, take this away from me. So I would just pass it down the row and let them decide what they're going to do. That's what I would do. I don't know if that's right. I don't know if it's on our list or not. I have to put the closed communion on our list if that's not on there. Because that's the